What's going on, guys? Today, I want to talk about Larussell. If you are not familiar, Larussell is a rapper that has been in the news a little bit recently following some statements he made about Lil Wayne and then also for some career moves that he's made. So, Larussell has always sort of painted himself as an independent rapper, really carries that movement hard, very much like a Russ in that way. And he has tried different things as an artist, like as far as the way he makes money off of his music and the way that he makes content for his audience. He's done some very pioneer type things for himself that will hopefully make it easier for those coming after him that maybe want to follow in his shoes as far as the independent route. All that aside, basically he's been in the news in a little bit recently, and for more controversial things. Like I said, he had some statements about Lil Wayne that some people didn't like. I think that clip was taken a bit out of context. Not that maybe they wouldn't still have the opinion that they had with context, they being people on the internet. But I do think that it was definitely clipped in a way to make it look as bad as possible. And then also, the other thing is him being in the news is he signed a deal with Rock Nation. I can't remember the exacts of the deal, but it is the type of deal where he still gets to like retain ownership of his music, and it's a lot more friendly terms than a typical deal that an artist might sign, where ownership and things like that are a lot, more in the label's favor than they are the artist. So the reason he was in trouble for that, or I don't even want to say trouble, but obviously he signs this deal, and then it comes down to the question of like, well, are you even still independent then if you're technically signed to Rock Nation? Like, how is that being independent? And I think that just kind of comes down to your personal feelings and what you consider to be independent or not, which I don't think there's a, one size fits all definition of only this, because he's retaining ownership and he's being independent in a lot of the ways that matter. But at the end of the day, he's signing with Rock Nation. So it's like, what does that mean? I'm not going to comment on that specifically right now, but he was getting some criticism, and that was from his actual fans, his core audience, because that's part of the reason why people sort of bought into him. I don't want to say that what music wasn't part of it, but it's really nice for people when they feel like they're supporting an independent artist and like they want to attach themselves to a movement like that, especially in today's day and age where it's more important than ever for artists to find ways to actually make this like a job for themselves, a way that they can support themselves, because money has dried up in a lot of other avenues that music previously had. You don't have the hard sales anymore, you have streams, so automatically there's less money on the table. Obviously there's stuff like physical sales still and merch and all that, but a lot of artists are exploring other avenues, Larussell being one of the pioneers of just trying new different ideas to keep himself, still going, being able to make money while still releasing music that his fans like. So the Rock Nation deal, that was definitely criticism from his audience more so. Maybe a few people, because that was after the Lil Wayne comments that he was getting just general criticism from people online. He was never an artist that people would really even know his name like that until this story. Not trying to take shots. I think that's just true. The independent thing, your visibility is just a lot less than if you're part of the machine. And so he had his core fan base who rocked with him, but a lot of general listeners still were not super familiar with him. So when he was making these comments about Lil Wayne and people are clipping it, that's a lot of people's like first impression of him, and a lot of people's just general image of him was now shaped by this one clip that didn't put him in the best light. So he's kind of got these two stories within the last month or so. I can't remember exactly when, but that was like this year. I don't even think it's been a month. And then now he's kind of going viral. I think the scale of it so far from what I've seen is a lot smaller than those last two stories. But I've been seeing people clip or talk about this clip where he starts off by talking about he's performing for people, and he starts off talking about why this song that he's about to perform, how his producer told him he shouldn't drop it, and he asks him why, and it's because of the content of the song. It's just maybe not good to drop it right now given everything that's in the news. And then he starts singing the song and talking about people being heaven sent and like God's creation, and includes some typical names that you'd expect someone like him to maybe say, like Kanye. And then he starts getting into some very controversial figures, like a certain guy named Jeffrey who had an island. another guy that was from Germany that used to be a painter, if you catch my drift. So he's talking about these people being heaven sent, and it was more so, it was like a minute and 20-second clip, mostly him talking about that preamble of the producer part, and then like maybe 30 seconds of him actually performing, and it's really just him talking about those names. I don't even think it was the full song. So now you got this clip going online, and obviously a lot of people don't necessarily love what he's saying, talking about, heaven sent with these terrible people. And I think that while this is maybe not the best look for him in a lot of ways, I think it's just unfortunate timing as well as unfortunate clipping. Like, he put the post out, like the video is under his account that he posted. So like he intentionally put this out. It wasn't just someone trying to hate. And now people are seeing what he's posted and they don't mess with it. They don't agree with it. And like I said, I'm not even trying to get into that part right now necessarily about is it actually right or wrong. But I think it's just a great example of how him getting this greater exposure, while in theory might be good for just people getting eyes on him, obviously now he's got it in the wrong way, and he's got all of this negative talk and buzz surrounding his name, and it's because people who are not fans of him are witnessing this stuff. And not to say that his own fans wouldn't have had problem with these statements, because I very well could see that as well, but it would have been a much more self-contained potential, upsetness. And at the very least, he probably wouldn't really have lost too many listeners, if any. I think when you keep it to your fan base, if they're rocking with you like that, they might be more like, hey, this one isn't for me, or I think you missed with this one. But I don't think any of them have think he's trying to do anything beyond, just make music that what he feels is expressing himself. So I don't think that there's any malice in it. I think it was just some odd wording and maybe not the best timing for it, for sure. But at the same time, I would love artists to always remain true to themselves and what they want to make in the moment. And so for him, if that was this song, I guess it's that song. But at the very least, like I said, if it was contained to his audience, to his core fan base, I don't think there would have been nearly as much blowback. I think people obviously would be like, oh, you know what? I rock with you. I know you're a good guy. This one ain't for me, but whatever, let's see what you put out next. Whereas, the general people that might get eyes on this on Twitter are not going to be so forgiving with their opinions, and they're not going to give you as big of a, whatever excuse to be like, oh, hey, I think maybe he just worded that in a way that didn't sound great. I think he means the greatest of intentions with whatever his message is. I don't know if he even regrets doing it either, though, because I don't think that the people that are upset are the ones that he needs to be worried about. Those people were never going to really rock with Larussell anyway. Let's be real. A lot of them are. Like I said, maybe some genuine fans could still have a problem with it, but I think for it to have taken another life of its own like this is more so just because there's still heat around his name from those other things. At the very least, people remember that story still. It's still in the back of people's minds, and it can kind of utilize a pre-existing emotion towards not liking him that was already there because they didn't agree with what he said about Lil Wayne, or they didn't like how he totes being independent and is now signing with Rock Nation. So I think that this is a great example of just not everyone should always necessarily hear or consume your art or what you're putting out if they aren't fans of yours, because the inclination to hate is just going to be so much stronger and the backlash is going to be so much worse. Obviously, it's the internet. You can't control what takes a life of its own. But this is very much in line with someone like Logic, where Logic has obviously a very large fan base. And whether or not you think Logic is good at making music, up for debate. Music is subjective. Let's be real, though. He has a solid fan base, but anyone that's outside of that fan base usually is only hearing about Logic because of something that he did that can be considered corny or goofy. Whether or not that means anything to Logic himself, who knows? I mean, like I said, he's got a solid enough fan base that I'm sure he does well enough and it's the same situation. The people being like, oh, Logic's goofy. Well, they were never throwing Logic music on to begin with, for the most part. That they never were going to support him in any way that was going to be meaningful to him. So if these are the people that think he's goofy. Does it really matter as long as your core fan base is rocking with you? Which I don't think it does. Like, if they weren't going to be buying or interacting with your music anyway, then what would be even the point of trying to satisfy that type of listener or that type of person? They're not your audience. They're just random people on the internet. So you're sort of just wasting your energy and effort. But let me know what you guys think. Like, do you think this is just another kind of overblown reaction because of the recent heat around his name and the controversy surrounding the different things he's said lately? Or do you think that this is kind of just the genuine reaction to what he's saying here? I honestly could see either, but it's hard to tell at this moment in time just because he is now under such a bigger microscope than he was before. But thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll see you later.